Hi, cutie little man. Hey, look at your blue eyes. Emma reacted with excitement after seeing John for the first time. She sat in Mr. Smith's car for the drop at her home. John was the 3-year-old son of Mr. Smith. Emma took him in her arms and kissed his head. Emma then asked the little boy, "What is your name, cutie?" After getting no response, Emma repeated her question and asked John again, "Tell me your name, darling." Mr. Smith, who was until now listening quietly to Emma and his son, broke his silence. He does not hear. There was complete silence in the car for a few minutes. Emma could not believe it. She became speechless and looked at Smith in shock. She already knew her boss recently lost his wife, but didn't know anything else about his family. Emma had been working in the company for 2 years, where Smith was her immediate boss. She was 29 years old, a tall girl who was beautiful inside and out. She was not only physically beautiful, but also had a heart of gold. She was brought up as an orphan, so her life wasn't easy at all. She was loving and compassionate, always ready to be there for anyone's help at any moment, even at times put herself in trouble to help others. The next day, Emma reached the office as her meeting with Mr. Smith was scheduled. She made coffee for herself and her boss after reaching the office. "Hello, Emma. Come and take a seat. I was waiting for you." Mr. Smith greeted Emma, and she, with a smile on her face, put the cup of coffee on the table in front of him. "Oh, thank you. I was needing it and knew you would bring it." Both grinned. Mr. Smith was 36 years old. A tall, broad, handsome man with a tan complexion. It took them 2 hours to complete their discussion on the ongoing project. At the end of the discussion, they talked about John, as Emma recently met that little boy. Then Smith invited Emma for a dinner at his home. As she was getting ready to visit Mr. Smith, she looked extremely beautiful in a red dress. Her big eyes were shining brightly, and the glow on her face depicted a lot about her feelings that started developing for Smith. On her way to Mr. Smith's house, she stopped for the balloons and flowers. "Welcome! You're right on time, Emma." Smith opened the door on Emma's arrival and received flowers, while John came running from the back and wrapped his hands around Emma's leg. Both Emma and Smith talked about their families and past. Smith realized that Emma would be the best life partner for him at the moment when he needed someone to take care of John. Just by this thought, while having a cup of coffee, he said, "Emma, I feel we can work as a family." Then he took a pause and continued, "What do you think about it?" Emma was not expecting this to happen so soon. She already considered herself part of the family. She replied with a smile on her face, "Yes, that is indeed a good idea, I feel." They both smiled and felt happy about this mutual decision, while John was still busy playing with the balloons. It seemed everything was happening so fast that there wasn't much time for them to think about anything. During all the arrangements, a thought crossed Emma whether she has made the right decision or not. Is everything happening too fast? Does she give more time before being part of the family? Soon, the day arrived when they both got married in a small ceremony. Emma looked stunning in white with a deep neckline and tight fitting. She was happy and nervous at the same time. John was wearing a black suit with a red tie, just like his father. Both father and son looked handsome, although John was the head turner of the event. Finally, they became a family, perhaps a loving family. Everything looked extremely fine when Emma realized how well they all were getting along together. She had poured all her love into John, which she, being an orphan, missed in her childhood. They, as a family, started having a lot of fun and delightful moments. Emma always kept in mind that Smith had lost his love of life, so it would not be easy for him. Emma was only thoughtful of Smith, but also started understanding the needs and wants of John as a little boy who was unable to convey. She was happy to be part of the family and started cherishing every moment together. Now she was over the moon about finding love and satisfaction. Emma adjusted well to the work and family. She even started learning American Sign Language to communicate with John. It helped develop a special bonding with little John. Life became much easier for Smith, who was struggling with the situation after his first wife's death. He got relieved, especially with the continuous thought he used to have for John being raised without his mother. One fine day, when they were enjoying their weekend, a bell rang. "Hey, good to see you. I was waiting for you." Smith hurried to open the door and welcomed his ex-girlfriend, Sophia, who recently got divorced, and introduced her to Emma. Though Smith didn't mention that she would be visiting them, which seemed to be quite weird to Emma, she noticed how differently Smith was behaving. He was kind of ignoring his wife in front of his ex-girlfriend. She found it quite degrading and insulting to be sitting in her own house as a stranger while her husband was enjoying the company of the guest. Emma tried to shed away this thought and let herself be normal. She brought some snacks and asked for dinner, to which Smith replied quickly, "Oh yes, she will have dinner with us." Emma looked in surprise and thought Smith might get up to help her in the kitchen for the dinner, but she faced disappointment. Not a week passed. One day, while out for John's therapy appointment in the clinic, Emma saw her husband sitting with Sophia in his car. She didn't believe that her husband said he would be busy in the meeting and she would take John alone for therapy. While driving, Smith didn't see his wife and son, but he seemed happy and laughing with Sophia sitting next to him. She instantly called Smith. "Darling, I'm going to the clinic for John's therapy." Her voice was full of anxiety. She stopped just to hear the response. "Yes, I told you to go as I am occupied in a meeting." He didn't seem to talk much. Emma couldn't believe her ears, as she was sure whom she saw. She returned home after the therapy, although she promised John to visit the park on their way back. But she was perturbed and wanted to go back home as soon as possible. She felt a severe headache and wasn't able to speak a word. Even John kept calling her, but she was completely lost in her thoughts. At home, her mind was still wondering why Smith lied to her. Then she started recalling some previous days when Smith excused himself from family time by saying he had some important clients to meet, that he would come home late, and used to say he had dinner with clients. He had been on calls more often, and whenever there was a call, he would quickly go out or talk in private, but Emma never thought her husband could have an affair with his ex-girlfriend. She started thinking about where she stood in Smith's life. She occupied herself with John's care and protection so much that her husband got attracted to his ex-love. Was it her negligence or too much trust in her husband? Where did she go wrong? Was she being fooled around? She was unable to accept what she saw and was ignorant of her husband's affair so far. It made her disgusted and insulted to the core. She banged her fist on the sofa. Tears rolled down her cheeks, which she kept wiping with her hands, and unable to control her emotions. It was a blow that hit her hard. Her husband, whom she was trusting so much, had been cheating on her. When Smith came back home that day, Emma was just quietly reading Smith's face and thought to talk to him, but could not find words for how to start and confront her husband. She was heartbroken completely and considered herself very weak. "Are you all right? You look tired to me." There was no love in Smith's tone, as if he was asking from a stranger. Emma just replied, "No, I'm fine." Emma was expecting he would come to hug her and show concern. Might be she would then ask him and sort out what was bothering her. But he turned his back and went to get fresh. Emma wanted to scream out loud, as it was unbearable to hold back, and she wasn't able to talk. She kept thinking about how anyone could be unconcerned, especially one whom she was loving the most. She went to the kitchen and kept crying, feeling empty, extremely weak, and alone. She was still expecting that Smith would come to look for her and console her at least, but he didn't show up and occupied himself in the work. Probably he got busy chatting with Sophia, who was keeping him busy all this time. After a couple of days, Emma was inside the house preparing for lunch, and Smith went out saying he would be back in an hour. She was ready to talk that day about what was bothering her so much, and was feeling stressed out. Meanwhile, Emma didn't see John going outside the main door, as they never let him be alone outside the house. She was so engrossed in her thoughts. John's voice didn't distract her from her deep thoughts. She was just thinking about how she would start this most difficult conversation with whom she loved. There was hope that Smith would admit and apologize to her for his negligence. She was trying to be in the false world and kept saying to herself that everything would turn out fine. While she was busy thinking and preparing lunch for her husband and son, she heard some shouts and cries from John. All of a sudden, Smith entered the house yelling at Emma. "How could you be so irresponsible to let John go out? What if anything happened to him?" Emma hurriedly came to see John and took a sigh of relief that John was all right and let him into his room. Then Emma came back and took the courage to speak to Smith. "Is he only my responsibility? What about his dad?" She paused, then continued, "who is having an affair with his ex-girlfriend." Smith looked at her. That look was not of embarrassment, and tried to deny the allegation. "What rubbish! You've gone out of your mind!" Smith also started shouting and asked her how she could say without any proof. Yes, Emma didn't have any proof, and that was keeping her quiet up till now, but her pain was reaching a level where she couldn't resist or hold back. Then Smith's reminding her of responsibility also hit her hard. She had been trying and doing her best to keep both her husband and stepson happy. Knowing all this well, even then Smith taunted her. Emma said everything, that she saw him with Sophia when he was supposed to be busy in the meeting. Furthermore, he lied to her when she called him to confirm or clear her confusion. Then she also mentioned how he had been extra busy and occupied by saying to meet his clients more often. Her heart was beating so fast that she felt like her heart was in her throat. She wanted him to admit and feel ashamed of what he had been doing. As Emma was waiting that he might give her that warm hug that she was missing lately, and everything would get normal. She would generously forgive Smith even if he asked her for forgiveness. That's how Emma was. But nothing like that happened. Rather, things started turning serious. Smith kept denying what Emma was saying, as there was no proof, so it was easy for him to get away with this. It was also unexpected for him that Emma found out, as he was playing safe. Out of continuous denial and increasing argument, Smith left the house without saying anything about where he was going and when he would return. It was a complete shock to Emma that he left the matter in the middle. He neither admitted nor consoled her. She was not expecting at least this at all. He didn't bother to clear her doubts, even if he was trying to hide. He acted so differently that Emma stood for some time motionless and saw him going out in the car, then got out of her sight. She sat down and started crying out loud. But then she also thought John would not come out and see her like this. She put her hands on her mouth and kept crying. The answer she was looking for still making a whirlpool in her mind. She was completely heartbroken and lost. Smith didn't come back that night. She received the forwarded message that he was traveling for a few days. This was another blow to her, and she couldn't believe it. How could he be so insensitive? She was trying to be the perfect homemaker for all this time. The way she had been taking care of John, his routine, and his needs were exceptionally difficult. But she never scolded John because she was genuinely loving her family. She was being faithful to her husband and never thought for a second that he would do this to her. Emma kept trying to contact Smith but was unable to get any response. She was sure that he must be traveling with Sophia, and they might have planned already. That's why Smith didn't even bother to indulge in the talk with Emma. She tried to get some information about Sophia, if her doubt was correct or not. There was a lot of anxiety and stress, which eventually overpowered Emma, and she was unable to cope with it. She kept on taking a deep breath now and then. She didn't want to involve anyone to tell how she was feeling. "Miss Sophia is not in the office. She is on leave for this week," someone from her office told Emma, who was trying to confirm whether she had gone along or not with Smith. Now Emma was confirmed and did not doubt that Sophia must be with Smith. She held the phone in her hand and couldn't move a bit. He had gone with her without bothering she already knew about his affair. "Wow, what a fool I've made of myself," she whispered to herself. She threw the phone on the floor and sat down before she would fall on the floor. She felt dizzy and had a complete spin in her head. She screamed aloud and burst into tears like a small child. She kept crying for hours and poured out what she was holding back for quite some time. She was crying, crying, and crying. She felt completely dejected and devastated. She had never left herself so meaningless, even though life had been harsh on her since her childhood without her parents. Who would better know the importance of parents in a child's life than her? John was at his school, and Emma was all alone at home, crying out loud. She didn't leave John, which she could have easily done if she would have been a selfish person. She was taking care of John, even after Smith left the house without thinking about anyone. She didn't only make John her son by saying, but also proved it through her love and dedication. There was a time when Emma used to think herself of getting overburdened, but probably out of love for her family, she never mentioned it to her husband. Rather, she used to stay happy in front of him so he would not get worried. She was now thinking, did she make a mistake? Not every girl could own a husband's child from his first wife, especially when the child needed extra care and attention. She loved the way John started calling her mommy with his broken words. She used to sit and communicate with him in American Sign Language. She learned to cook food that a boy of 3 years could eat and like. She used to feed him while communicating with him just like any mother would do. She kept thinking now what she could do, as she didn't have the heart to leave John, even if Smith continued having an affair. She would neither let her husband have an affair, nor could she leave Smith and John. She was trapped in this relationship due to her compassionate and considerate nature. She had started feeling stressed out all the time. Nights became sleepless, and days either busy with John or thinking. Most of the time she found herself crying quietly and unable to control her emotions. Her days and nights were spent figuring out how to move on. Her eyes became swollen, and she also lost some weight. At times in the middle of the night she would wake up and go out to breathe, deep breathing with open mouth as if feeling suffocated. She then burst into tears that what had life done to her? She decided to talk to Smith as soon as he returned, to know about his inner thoughts related to their marriage. She would then calm herself down by thinking that Smith would realize his mistake eventually. With this thought, she kept crying and crying as hope and uncertainty took over her.